They called them monsters. The Mongols, a name that still sends shivers down the spine of history. We remember the burning cities, the mountains of skulls, the screams that echoed across continents, and yes, that terror was real. But what if I told you that behind the blood and fire, behind the most feared warriors the world has ever seen, lies one of humanity's greatest untold miracles? Genghis Khan didn't just conquer the world, he rewired it, took a fractured, violent, impossible planet and turned it into something extraordinary, the world's first global economy. A network so safe, so revolutionary, that legends spoke of a virgin carrying gold across thousands of miles without harm. This wasn't just conquest, this was transformation. Today, we're diving into the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. A peace forged in blood. Yes, but one that gave birth to paper money, international trade, and the very idea of a connected world. This is the story of how the most brutal empire in history accidentally built the foundation of our modern civilization. If you're ready to see history like you've never seen it before, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next will blow your mind. History has branded the Mongols as humanity's nightmare. When we hear their name, we see endless steppes filled with mounted warriors, cities reduced to ash, and the grim architecture of human suffering. The chronicles tell us they built pyramids not of stone, but of severed heads. They executed entire populations. They turned fertile lands into graveyards. This wasn't propaganda. This was documented reality. The Mongol war machine was perhaps the most efficient killing apparatus the medieval world had ever witnessed. But here's what's haunting. If you stop at the violence, if you close the book on the blood, you miss something profound. You miss one of the most consequential revolutions in human civilization. Because Genghis Khan and his descendants didn't just destroy the old world, they built something unprecedented from its ashes. Transport yourself to the 12th century, before the Mongol explosions. The legendary Silk Road, that romantic notion of caravans carrying exotic goods between East and West, was mostly fantasy. The reality was far grimmer. Picture not a road, but a deadly maze of fragmented paths controlled by dozens of petty kingdoms, each with its own greedy ruler, each demanding exorbitant tolls. A merchant attempting to move silk from China to Europe faced an impossible gauntlet. Every border meant new taxes. Every territory harbored different bandits. Local wars could erupt without warning, trapping caravans in war zones. The economic friction was overwhelming. Most goods never made the journey. Most merchants never returned home. Trade existed, barely, but it was strangled by political fragmentation and endemic violence. Then the horsemen came. When Mongol armies appeared on the horizon, cities faced an impossible choice: surrender or face annihilation. Their reputation was their weapon. Tales of their brutality traveled faster than their horses. But here's what transformed everything. What happened after the conquest? Most conquerors throughout history followed a simple pattern: id, loot, leave. The Mongols did something radically different. They absorbed, they integrated. They didn't just take cities, they wove them into a unified administrative fabric. By the mid-1200s, something miraculous had occurred: the entire Asian trade network, from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, operated under single management. Imagine the modern European Union, but spanning an even larger territory, and enforced not by bureaucrats, but by the most fearsome military force on the planet. A merchant in the 13th century could travel from Beijing to Baghdad without crossing a meaningful border. No passport checks, no currency exchanges, no customs nightmares. It was unprecedented in human history. The Mongols understood something that eluded most medieval rulers. Sustainable wealth comes not from plundering, but from facilitating commerce. They slashed the parasitic taxes that had choked trade for generations. They standardized weights and measures across continental distances. A pound of silk in Guangzhou was still a pound in Tehran. They created what economists would now call reduced transaction costs on a scale never before imagined. But their masterstroke was perhaps the most sophisticated communication network before the telegraph. Every 20 to 30 miles across their vast empire, they built relay stations. Fresh horses, hot food beds, and supplies waited at each post. Riders carrying special passports, golden tablets called paises, received absolute priority. They could ride at full gallop. switching mounts at each station, covering distances that seemed supernatural. A messenger could travel 200 miles in a single day. Information that previously took months now took days. The Great Khan in Beijing could know grain prices in Baghdad before local governors did. This wasn't just fast communication. It was the nervous system of a continental superorganism. Here's where the story gets fascinating. The Mongols were largely illiterate. They were raised in saddles, not schools. Genghis Khan himself never learned to read. But they possessed something more valuable than education. They knew what they didn't know. They couldn't administer a complex, multi-continental economy alone. So they initiated perhaps history's greatest forced redistribution of talent. If you were a brilliant Persian accountant, a Chinese engineer, a Russian craftsman, or a Damascus weaver, you weren't simply killed or enslaved. You were identified, valued, and employed. The Mongols moved these experts like chess pieces across their empire, placing skills where they were needed most. Muslim financial administrators revolutionized Chinese tax systems. Chinese engineers built irrigation networks in the Middle East. French goldsmiths worked in the Mongolian capital of Karakorum. It was forced cross-pollination of genius on a scale never before attempted. The Mongol Empire became a crucible where technologies, philosophies, and cultures mixed and created something entirely new. By the mid-1200s, the Mongols faced an unexpected problem: success. Trade was exploding, caravans were growing, deals were expanding. They were running out of money, specifically copper coins. The physical currency couldn't keep pace with the economy it was supposed to serve. He wants paper, dirty, gray pieces of paper. You think he's insane? How would anyone trade precious silk for worthless paper? Then he explains, use this paper or the emperor will execute you. This was the Chow, the world's first true fiat currency. The warnings printed on each note were clear: counterfeits will be decapitated. This wasn't metaphor, and incredibly it worked. Marco Polo, serving in Kublai's court, watched in amazement. It seemed like alchemy, creating wealth from nothing. He created social safety nets when provinces suffered famine. For a few glorious decades, it seemed like the perfect system. But there's an iron law in economics. If you make money easy to create, it becomes impossible to stop spending it. He ordered a massive invasion fleet, thousands of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers. How did he pay? He printed money. Then a typhoon destroyed his entire fleet. Most empires would pause, reconsider. But Kublai had a printing press. Another catastrophe. Here's the economic reality. When ships sink, the wood, iron, food, and labor are gone, destroyed. But the paper money that paid for them, still circulating. Suddenly you have massive amounts of currency chasing far fewer goods. Prices exploded. To cover deficits, the government reformed the currency in 1287. One new note now equaled 5 old ones. The government was robbing its own people to fund failed wars. Finance ministers became mob bosses, using printing presses to enrich themselves. Trust the single ingredient that makes fiat currency work evaporated. People hoarded real assets. They buried silver and copper. They spent paper money as fast as possible before it lost more value. This accelerated inflation further, creating a death spiral. By 1350, Dodu's streets were literally carpeted with worthless paper money blowing in the wind like leaves. Vendors wouldn't accept wheelbarrows full of cash for a single bag of rice. The government kept printing higher denominations, adding zeros, desperately trying to maintain the illusion. The Mongol Empire, master of the world, had printed itself into oblivion. The Mongols showed us something profound: that connecting the world creates more wealth than conquering it. That information networks matter more than military might. That trust is the foundation of all economic systems. They also taught us the eternal danger of unlimited monetary creation, a lesson governments are still struggling to learn today. History remembers the Mongols as destroyers, but perhaps their greatest legacy was showing humanity for the first time what a truly connected world could look like. They built it with terror and maintained it with ruthlessness, but they built it nonetheless. And in doing so, they created the template for our modern globalized economy, for better and for worse. History branded them monsters. The Mongols, architects of terror, builders of skull pyramids, burners of cities. Every word is true. But if you stop there, you miss the most extraordinary paradox in human history. The most brutal empire ever created accidentally built the foundation of our modern world. When Mongol armies conquered cities, they did something unprecedented. They integrated them. By the mid-1200s, the entire Asian trade network operated under single management. Imagine traveling from Beijing to Baghdad without crossing a border. No passports, no currency exchanges, no customs. It was revolutionary. The Mongols slashed taxes, standardized measurements, and understood a truth that eluded other conquerors. Commerce creates more wealth than plunder. The Mongols were illiterate warriors, but they knew what they didn't know. So they initiated history's greatest talent redistribution. Brilliant accountants from Persia reformed Chinese taxes. Chinese engineers built Middle Eastern irrigation. French goldsmiths worked in Mongolia. Ideas separated by continents for centuries suddenly collided. Gunpowder traveled west. Persian astronomy reached China. It was forced genius cross-pollination, creating an unprecedented technological boom. By the 1250s, trade exploded so fast they ran out of money. Copper coins couldn't keep pace. Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, introduced something radical: the chow, the world's first true fiat currency. Paper, not backed by gold, not redeemable for silver. Valuable only because Kublai declared it valuable. Each note carried a warning: counterfeits will be decapitated. It worked brilliantly. Merchants loved carrying fortunes in their pockets instead of tons of copper. Kublai extended the Grand Canal, created social safety nets, funded science and arts. Marco Polo watched in amazement. It seemed like alchemy. But here's the iron law. If money is easy to create, it's impossible to stop spending. Kublai looked at Japan and decided he wanted it. He built a massive invasion, fleet thousands of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers. How did he pay? He printed money. A typhoon destroyed everything. The legendary kamikaze sent his fleet to the ocean floor. Most empires would pause, but Kublai had a printing press. He built a second fleet. Another typhoon, another catastrophe. The economic reality: when ships sink, the wood, iron, and labor are destroyed. But the paper money that paid for them, still circulating? Massive currency chasing fewer goods means one thing: inflation. To cover deficits, the government reformed currency. In 1287, one new note equaled 5 old ones. Savings lost 80% overnight. They were robbing their own people. Corruption exploded. Finance ministers became criminals using printing presses for personal wealth. Trust, the only thing that makes fiat currency work, evaporated. People hoarded real assets. They spent paper money immediately before it lost more value. This accelerated inflation, creating a death spiral. By 1350, Dodu streets were carpeted with worthless paper money blowing like leaves. Vendors refused wheelbarrows of cash for a bag of rice. The government kept printing higher denominations, adding zeros, desperately maintaining the illusion. The Mongol Empire, master of the world, had printed itself into oblivion. The Pax Mongolica collapsed, but its innovations survived. Paper money spread west. Unified trade zones influenced future empires. The cross-pollination of ideas permanently altered civilization. The Mongols showed us that connecting the world creates more wealth than conquering it. That information networks matter more than military might. That trust is everything. They also taught us the eternal danger of unlimited money printing, a lesson governments still haven't learned. If this changed how you see history, hit that subscribe button, because there are dozens more stories like this waiting to blow your mind. History remembers the Mongols as destroyers, but perhaps their greatest legacy was showing humanity, for the first time, what a truly connected world could look like. They built it with terror and maintained it with ruthlessness, but they built it nonetheless. And in doing so, they created the template for globalization, for better and for worse. The world we live in today, with its international trade, fiat currencies, and instant communication, all began with horsemen from the steppes who accidentally discovered that connection is more powerful than conquest.